Okay.
Just the once. That's all I needed.
Just the once.
One 15-foot drop. That's all I and a tase. A tased and a drop.
Yep. Yikes.
So did the tase happen before the fall or vice versa? Which one fixed which?
These are first, then the fall.
Thank you.
So are you guys ready to get going? I can go and make sure CJ's getting things up and running if you're ready.
Yes, I think we've got everybody here. That'd be great.
Are we right back?
Okay.
Okay, we're on record.
All right, great. Thank you. And let's call this meeting to order. This is the City of Lincoln City City Council meeting of Monday, September 21st, 2020, 6 p.m. And remind folks listening in that we always take public comments both from within the chamber, and we're equipped to meet you there and let you get on, use the chamber for your comments, or you can go to public comment at lincolncity.org and send those in for comments. I would have asked to make one agenda change, and would like to have perhaps Mr. Chandler, before we do public comments, just kind of bring us up to date on the emergency and steps we're taking, if you would.
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and I discussed a little bit earlier today to talk about, as we're looking at the end of the Echo Mountain Complex emergency, of how we go forward with our after action review. These are intended to look at the performance that has taken place, to understand the context of the what it is of the emergency, the city's role in it, and then to look at and then to do evaluations that would come from staff, from elected officials, public, and other emergency officials on how we can improve in the efficiency. Whenever you're looking at an emergency evaluation, you're talking both about effectiveness and efficiency. We are also looking at making sure that we have all of the information we can gather, so that as we evaluate it, we're evaluating it not only on perception, but also on what actually took place. And those may or may not be the same thing. The city staff will be holding a after action review on September 29th, where we will go through our own review of that. And then I wanted to schedule tonight a time when we could hold a work meeting to do the same thing with the city council, not only to provide you information from the staff's review, but also to get your input as well. At that time, well, actually during both meetings, we will also be discussing all of the public comments that we have received, and we've received a lot of comments on how we can improve upon the emergency management of it. Because there were so many organizations involved, our intent would then ultimately to create a final report that would go out not only to us, but also recommendations we would have for other organizations, specifically the county, the state, and others that were involved in this emergency management. So the one thing that I would really like to, well, there's two things that I'd like to do tonight. One is to just remind people to continue to send information. All of your own experiences are valuable in that it gives us the opportunity to look at how this, to look at how we improve our efficiency, and then to schedule a date with the city council when we can have a work meeting.
Mr. Chandler, you'd prefer to have that after the staff meeting on the 29th, is that correct?
I would. It would give us a chance to just work through our own review so that we can discuss that with you, and also to make sure that our whole staff has had a chance to review all of the information that's come in so that the information is correct as it comes to you.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a date selected, or would we start with Monday the 5th of October?
That's actually what I was thinking of. If you would like to hold that meeting, normally we'll hold work meetings in the morning, and I'm requesting it to be a work meeting and not a special city council meeting. So there's a little bit more free flow of ideas that can be discussed.
Is there a chance we could move that same day, but to early afternoon,
That would be fine.
say 1 o'clock?
From the staff point, that would work great.
Okay. How about council? Would October 5th at 1 o'clock be fine?
Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
I might also point out, Mr. Mayor, that it will be our emergency preparedness coordinator, who has many, many years of experience in this, and our chief of police that will be the ones leading this review. They'll be using their own experience in the area of emergency.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll continue encouraging public to send in their observations, and some of it obviously will be duplications, but it's still nice to hear from different perspectives. So with that, why don't we move to the consent agenda? And we have 4 items on the consent agenda. It's a meeting, minutes of regular meeting, June 22nd, 2020, 6 p.m. Minutes of regular meeting, August 24th, 2020, 6 p.m. Minutes of special meeting, September 2nd, 2020 at 10 a.m. And minutes of special meeting, September 14th, 2020, 10 a.m. And I might point out that there's been a correction made to the minutes of that September 14th meeting, where the correct and new name of the villages at the Woods is...
Sitka Woods.
I'm sorry, Sitka Woods. It's been corrected. Thank you. I would entertain a motion, unless somebody wants to pull one of these for further discussion.
Mayor, I did get a comment from Mr. Hoagland that I need to make a minor change to a. I had said that somebody came to council because they were afraid. I said it backwards, so I will fix that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if nobody wants to pull one, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons.
Second.
And a second from Casper. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Thank you. This would be the times for comments from citizens present. Mr. Twig, is there anybody in the chamber?
Yes, Mayor, we have 2 citizens in the chamber. I'm not sure if they wish to comment. I will find out.
Yeah, please.
I'm just here strictly for disaster preparedness and evacuation, but I don't know if they're taking comments.
Okay, Mayor, we have one lady coming up. I'll disinfect the mic.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Kim Calbo, and I'm a South Bend resident. I just wanted to share a little bit of information, a couple of thoughts. I know that it sounds like we're going to have some work sessions coming up, but really what I wanted to share was that, you know, the community is a group of young people, old people, very diverse community. And whatever the responses are that, you know, we come up with, you know, in the future, I think that the response needs to really reflect the diversity of our citizens. So, you know, no one communication style is going to be appropriate for people who are 16 years old, you know, or 72 years old. I think we need to, you know, basically treat our disaster preparedness kind of like we would for a marketing blitz. You know, hit everything. What are we doing for Explore Lincoln City? Do the same things, and if not more, for our disaster preparedness. So some of the things that I jotted down, just a couple of ideas, are things, you know, pretty commonplace, but, you know, radio, telephone, text alerts, television, sirens, mail, email, Lincoln City website, local social media. Use that to drive people to the actual, you know, correct.
I couldn't get on with my computer.
Use that to drive people to whatever the actual, you know, city website or official sites are. You know, and another thing too would be signage. We've got tsunami signs throughout town. Why not have, you know, for emergency, you know, dial in to whatever the radio station is, or, you know, an email address or a phone number. I grew up in the Midwest, and in the country, they had signs that would say, you know, for tornadoes, dial and whatever the local radio call numbers were. So my main point is, and I'm not going to belabor this, but just really to, you know, think about as many possibilities as we can, implement as many as we can, and as cost effectively as we can, but there are no wrong answers. You know, the power went out, so a lot of the options that I mentioned kind of go out the door, but it was amazing, you know, while people are trying to preserve, you know, whatever cell phone power they have, how much they were getting out of their cars, you know, when we were stuck for 2.5 hours, you know, in Rhodes End, communicating with each other, talking to the people, you know, in front of them, behind them. So again, that's really all I've got, but I just wanted to say, you know, the more communication, the better. You can't err with that. So that's it.
That's fine. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just got a comment from somebody saying that they couldn't hear her hardly at all.
Okay. Well,
And so maybe if David asked people to really get really close to the microphone, it might be helpful.
yep.
Thank you, will do.
Thank you.
That might go.
I'll send an email anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Joyce Sherman, and I suppose I don't really have a right to say anything because I do not live in the city. I'm one of 2 households that were not annexed when Rhodes End annexed because we live on acreage. No one notified us to evacuate except some woman drove down Salasee, and I happened to be out dipping water out of the creek to force flush the toilet, and she said, we have to evacuate. I'd never seen her before. I don't know where she was from. I called the sheriff's office to confirm it, and we left and sat in our car for 2.5 hours, everyone totally confused until the last 15 minutes when a search and rescue guy came by with a loudspeaker and told us why we were sitting. It was pretty frustrating and you should have heard all the rumors that went back and forth as people walked from car to car, talking about why we were sitting, what was going on, whether we were all going to burn to death in our cars. All kinds of fun things were discussed. But what really upset me was a week ago Tuesday, a full week after people were evacuated from the fire zone, I was at the backpack pantry loading bread, and 3 people who saw me come out of the city building rushed over to say they were still sleeping in cars and where could they go for help. There was lots of help available by then. That was a week after the fire. I find this inexcusable. And electronic communication didn't work. There were no radio stations, local radio stations functioning Tuesday or Wednesday. It was really frustrating. And we have to realize that there's very poor cell phone reception in lots of places in the city, including in the backpack pantry where you can't use your phone. We need to have a way for people to communicate, and the simplest thing would be signs on City Hall. After those people came up to me, I called around and made sure I had hours correct and posted signs on City Hall and took them over to the community center, and they were passed out there and at the hotels where people were evacuated. The hotel people didn't know where to send people to get clothing or toiletries. It was just totally not coordinated. And it's really frustrating because we were the place that many people came because we were the closest place. I think it was really embarrassing to have to tell people where to find the Red Cross and where they could find food, clothing, etc. And the other thing we need more of is we need more coordination between all of us who try to serve the people who need. Backpack has done a pretty good job of reaching out to other organizations, and we share any extra we have rather than hoarding it. Some of the organizations don't share. This week I have already given bread to 3 different organizations, and I'll be giving bread to 2 others tomorrow morning. We don't need it right now for Backpack. Our families are all dislocated, or mostly dislocated, because they live north of town. So we definitely need some coordination between organizations, and we need some kind of emergency plan. We never did get a phone message on our landline because I would have gotten it as voicemail days later. We never got a message to evacuate. We did get a message from the city that they were patrolling the evacuated area and to prevent looting. But somehow, when I was tracking FedEx, I saw that the FedEx truck had tried to deliver to our house. Apparently, they thought he wasn't a looter, but still. It's kind of disturbing to be in Portland and hear that our delivery had been attempted while we were still evacuated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else there, Mr. Quigg?
No, Mayor, that is it.
Okay. Ron, did you get any emails in or notices in on?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we received 4, and I'll just briefly summarize them. All of these have been sent to the City Council. They all will also be added to the public record. So the first one is from Cheryl Fullerton. Again, these are summaries. Look to the minutes for the full version of these. From Cheryl Fullerton, she made the following recommendations: a clear and frequent communication plan to keep residents apprised of the status of each neighborhood in Lincoln City. Leaders must be more visible. Email updates are inadequate. Traffic in neighborhoods that have only one route in and out needs to be managed actively, and a plan for VRD education and evacuation must be developed and implemented. The next email is from Sheila Peterson. Why has the city siloed off public comments into 2 avenues of expression, in person and by email? The city needs to establish a workable channel of communication with the public. Your citizens are talking about their issues and concerns about this disaster, and they're doing it on social media. The city needs to enter in the modern era of using social media as a tool to gather and disseminate information. The next one is from Karen Stewart. City needs to take a serious look at the failures of the city manager during the wildfire and evacuation. A majority of the citizens in this town received no communications by officials during the crisis. Perhaps we can retrofit the tsunami alert system to include wildfires. Our city government needs to acknowledge that there were mistakes made and the manager needs to be held accountable. The next is from Liz Corzine. Comments: no plan for medevac. Where were the airplanes and fire retardant? The new hospital doesn't have has no backup power generators. Natural gas was shut off without notification. Broadband communication was shut down. Traffic on 101 southbound out of town at a crawl. 101 needs widened and improved in Lincoln County. Failure of the state to prepare for a natural disaster is overwhelmingly incompetent. Huge amount of elderly people in Lincoln City and elected officials are hanging them out to dry. It is every man, woman, and child for themselves during a disaster, and you're concerned about housing costs. It is not the government's job to provide housing for people, but it is the government's job to protect people from harm. That's a summary of each of them, Mayor.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, why don't we move ahead? We've got ordinances and ordinance number 2020-14. This will be a second reading.
Yeah, Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2020-14, ordinance of the City of Lincoln City, amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, Zoning, Chapter 1772, Sign Regulations, amending and updating city sign regulations, removing provisions for temporary signs. I have a couple changes to read. They're on pages 5, 7, and 8, 22, 30, and 31. It'll take me a little bit of time to scroll down to there. In the meantime, I'll tell you that Councilor Mark had sent me changes. They were essentially grammatical and punctuation changes, and we have made those changes. It's not reflected in the draft that's before you in the packet, but under the codification section of the ordinance, the recorder is authorized to make such grammatical and punctuation changes. So we've just gone ahead and done that. So the first change should be on page, I have to read any changes that occur between first and second. I did read changes last time, but we've made a couple more changes since we were here. So, and this is out of order for some reason. Okay. I think I had highlighted the changes in yellow in the packet so you wouldn't have to search for them. I don't know if that came through. Okay, the first change is in section E under 1772 of 030, I believe, 035. And it's just to add a except as provided in F below, placement of signs.
Richard, what page are you on?
Packet page 50. The first change is in yellow and it's under paragraph E. And then we move to, and I'm sorry, there are just a couple of these, and they're not real big deals, but somehow between pages 7 and 8, the prohibition on signs on undeveloped lots had gotten dropped. I'm not quite sure why. So we restored it to specifically prohibited signs by zoning district include the following: signs on undeveloped lots or parcels in GC, PLRC, PC, MW, TVC, and OPD and NPD zones. So that was restoring something that was in and was deleted and was not recommended to be deleted. Next would be on page 22 of the ordinance. I should have marked the page in the packet. Okay. So on page 67 of the packet, I did reflect a change in the deleted language because we actually had granted an extension of the allowance for feather banners to October 8th. And we did that in a prior ordinance, and it didn't get reflected in the in this last version, partly because the Municipal Code Corporation had not posted an update of our code, so we were working from an old version. And then on page 30 and 31, I think that's just a minor change. Yeah. So section 13, I restored the definition of undeveloped lots. Section 1708 definitions, section 1708.010 definitions are hereby amended to add, remove, or amend, insert into the chapter in the appropriate section in alphabetical order the following defined signage term. Undeveloped lots or parcels. A lot or parcel is undeveloped unless lawful business operations are conducted on the lot in good faith, and 2, the lot either contains development that has been approved through the site plan review pursuant to city code, including but not limited to 1752-240, or contains development that would have been required to go through the site plan review if site plan review or its equivalent had existed at the time the development occurred. And then the changes on subsequent pages are just to change the section numbers because that was a new section that was inserted. And again, this was language that was in the prior ordinance that we've enforced and argued with people about. And so we have a history, and there was unsure exactly why the prohibition on signs on undeveloped lots was removed. As you know, signs are accessory, essentially, and you have to have a principal use before you can have an accessory use. So that we restored that because it makes a lot of sense. So with that, I'd ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance with changes as read.
So moved.
Mr. Hoagland, thank you.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Counselor Mark. All right. Any discussion? Counselor Hinton.
I just have a question about, now I've lost track of what page it is on, but the reference to the feather banners and having that be extended through October 8th. Is that right?
That was in the deleted text because this ordinance is an amendment to Title 17, and feather banners and are basically temporary signs. So they're in the next ordinance, Chapter 934.
Okay, so that's all I wanted. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Councilor Mark.
The answer to this question isn't, well, this comment is going to be the same. I just think people, if they're paying attention, hopefully if they're paying attention, might ask about the prohibition on signs on undeveloped lots. And of course, we all drive by undeveloped lots and we see temporary signs on them. I wonder if you could maybe just explain the distinction there.
Yes, at the last, well, when we did Chapter 934, we talked about the fact that a lot of times on undeveloped lots, you'll see various kinds of signs, like signs that usually pop up around elections. And those kind of signs, we decided, well, were temporary in nature and they weren't really land use. So back when we originally adopted 934, which had been a couple of years now, we said temporary signs are allowed on undeveloped lots. So in Chapter 17, we're talking about permanent signs. You wouldn't expect to see a permanent monument sign or any kind of sign on a lot at principal use, a primary use. Under land use, you have to have a principal use before you have an accessory use, sign or accessory. But temporary signs are, you know, transitory, they don't last long. And so within the limits of the exemptions that are in Chapter 934, you can have a temporary sign on an undeveloped lot.
Great, thank you. Other questions? All right, why don't we do a roll call vote?
Anderson,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and Parsons.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. And we have a second ordinance number 2020-222.
Your Honor, Council, this is first reading of ordinance 2020-22, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City, amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 9, Public Peace, Morals, and Welfare, revising Chapter 934 signage to add additional exemptions for signage to be consistent with Title 17. So I don't have to read changes because this is the first reading. Essentially what I did was the planning department had taken temporary signage out of Title 17. The only temporary signage that was in Title 17 was basically some, what are they called, sidewalk, like sandwich board type signs, board signs, and a banner sign, which were pretty much for there was a permit issued for those. All the signs in Chapter 934 that's been around for a while are exempt signs, no permit required. So I made an effort to take temporary and portable signs and make them an exemption in Chapter 934. And then I also took the temporary banner sign, which used to require a permit, and said that temporary banner sign would be allowed under an exemption within the category of signs occurring around times of elections, which I believe is 60 days prior and like 5 days after. I did not include any specific, also what I did was take the expiring substitution of feather banners for flags, and I made that just a permanent exemption or allowance in the code. So I basically made an effort to take those things that were previously allowed by permit and make them exempt, and also to continue the feather banner, which has not turned out to be a problem. I did write some possible language we could add about putting a not to exceed cap, and I don't think you have to do that now. I think they have not proven to be the problem that everyone thought they were going to be. So we can always come back later. This is temporary signage after all, not land use. So if it becomes a problem, we can come back and put a cap on it. So with that, I'd ask for approval of first reading of the ordinance. If you have any questions, please ask them.
I entertain a motion.
I'll move that we accept first reading of ordinance 2020-22.
Second.
There's a second from Mr. Parsons. First from, that was Mr. Hoagland?
Yeah, it was Rick with the motion and I seconded.
Okay, thank you. All right, discussion. Okay, Deanna? There's Counselor.
Yes, trying to find Richard. There he is. Okay, I thought, I'm confused about the feather banners. That was one of the things that got us started in this path anyway. So I'm surprised that every business can have 2 feather banners or 2 flags, and that just seems like an awful lot, because we're trying to calm it down and declutter the highway so it's not so distracting. And so we have the sign ordinance, which was going to make it easier for businesses to be seen. When we get those going. So I was really surprised to see the feather banners still in here.
It's actually, it's up to you.
We can't hear you, Richard.
Hold on. Well, I'm here. I don't know.
I can hear you, Richard.
I hear you.
You're all right.
This is not a legal question, it's a policy question. Used a previous amendment to basically test how bad would it be if we allowed two flags to be, or two feather banners to be substituted for flags. And we did that, and then we extended it another 6 months, and then we extended it again. And I haven't seen, at least from code enforcement perspective, complaints coming in about how this is being abused. But if you, as a council, believe that you don't want that too many, or if you would want it 2 per property as opposed to 2 per business, which is a distinction I pointed out between residential and commercial allowances that have been in our test period allowed, then you can make a motion to modify it. But pretty much all I did was codify what we've been running through the test period.
Correct.
I thought we were giving him the 6 months as a time to, I don't know, I guess I didn't see it as a test. So I just hate to discuss this again, and I thought the feather banners were going to go away, and we were going to have fewer flags and calm down the streets, so you can actually see a pedestrian when they walk out, and so you can see what the businesses are when we get our permanent signs up, and hopefully through economic development we will be able to assist that to move it along faster. But I for one would like to see the feather banners removed from this ordinance.
One thing we have done that is we made it clear that you're not allowed to put signs in the right of way, and that if there is allowance for the city engineer to authorize an encroachment, but that's the same allowance that was in there previously. But we're not, proposing to allow signs in city right of way. That's simply not going to happen. And that's where you see a lot of the obstruction.
Right. And I'm not talking about that, because when we actually, like I said, I hope that we can get those permanent signs that, through an economic development help, we can get people moved over to that. So maybe we have to think about how to do that. But again, I would like to remove the feather banners from the ordinance.
Councilor Parsons, you had a question?
Not a question, really, more of I was under the same assumption as Mrs. Hinton is. I thought we kept allowing the feather banners for the 6 months and then approved it again while we were working on finalizing these sign ordinances. That was my perception of all this.
Mr. Epicello, with this, is there a difference between this ordinance and what was there previously before we attacked the feather banners some year ago or longer?
No, feather banners were always prohibited. What we did a year and a half ago was to create a test, basically, to see if they would be offensive at a level of 2 per business. And so that's what we inserted into the code, and that's what we've been operating under for about 18 months. Now,
so the difference then is we did insert a limit. That was new.
You could substitute, yes, they weren't allowed. So what we did was authorize them as a test, substituting 4 flags. And, you know, in previous ordinances, flags were, there was an exemption, which probably couldn't have been defended. So we tried to clear that up. And it's just a temporary sign, material that flaps in the wind. So I'm on packet page 80, and if you want to get rid of the exemption for flags and feather banners, you would strike the added language and you would strike all of basically E. I will tell you that I was not under the assumption that we were eliminating the allowance. I was under the assumption, and because I wrote the council communications in the past, that we were testing this. It was kind of like, let's see how it is. I did not think we were amortizing feather banners that people had bought and giving them an opportunity to get some use out of them before we told them to throw them away. They were never allowed before, and so what we did was essentially give people the opportunity to try it out. A number of people that were interested in that hearings, and so this would be a change.
Councilor Hinton?
That's not at all my memory. My memory was that there were so many of them and they weren't permitted, so we were giving them a chance to use them while we were working on the ordinances and sorting all this out. I don't remember at all that we were going to include them.
Okay. I guess the question I would have is, during the year or so that we've been under extensions of allowing, have there been complaints? I mean, if
I've not heard it, you might ask Ron.
Ron, anything that would lead us to believe that, you know, there was still a sense of too many?
Not many as compared to what it was before we started allowing it.
Okay. Because I would sense there was a kind of a mixed bag of pros and cons on, you know, flags and banners and, you know, the feather banners and flags. And that's how we came up with this trade-off. So the way to resolve it is we've got a motion on the table, but is there a way to check the temperature of the council on this particular issue without backing out of the whole motion to approve the ordinance?
Well, you could approve first reading, and then you could ask the next question. Do you want to change or alter the text on page 80 and 81?
Okay.
So you wouldn't be voting on the first reading. You'd be voting subsequent to that. You'll give direction on this issue.
Yeah, so we'd vote on this motion that's on the table to approve the first reading, and then we'd do another motion to direct staff to, you know, remove the banner section.
Or to limit it. One option might be to say 2 per legal parcel as opposed to 2 per business.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But again, that's a change.
Okay. So then that's what I was trying to figure out. How do we get to resolve the conflict? So we have a motion on the table to approve the existing ordinance. And as you know, it takes 2 readings. So, is there any further discussion other than the flags and feather banners? I don't see any. Mr. Twig, roll call on the first reading.
Mark.
Yes.
Hoagland.
Yes.
Parsons.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Casper.
Yes.
And Hinton.
No.
Motion passes 5-1.
Okay. So that would be the first reading. Does somebody want to make a motion to direct staff? Okay. Councilor Hinton?
I move to direct staff to strike or remove the language about feather banners from ordinance number 2020-22.
And that's paragraph E, 1 and 2 on pages 80 and 81 of the packet.
Okay, my number system's a little different, but okay.
My numbers look different too.
But it would be, the motion would be one that strike the whole thing, no, none at all, like an alternative, right?
Yeah, because that's what I thought we were doing.
Okay. Is there a second? I don't see a second. That motion would die for lack of a second. Does somebody else want to make a motion? Councilor Parsons?
I don't want to make a motion. I just want to say that even though that was my recollection, I have no problem with allowing these in some form. It seems that the people want to use them and there hasn't been many complaints. But originally going into this, my recollection was we were trying to get rid of them. But I have no issue with the way this is written.
Okay. All right.
Your Honor, you did have a no vote on first reading. So under the charter, we need to continue second reading to the next available meeting would be the 28th.
All right. And we'll do that. Now, we've got another ordinance 2020-15, and if you read the staff report, they're recommending holding off on the second reading until 11/23/2020, or approve tonight and just have the effective date 1/1/21.
Your Honor, let me just clarify, did the last ordinance 22, is that unanimous consent to continue it to the 28th?
22.
Yeah.
We don't have, why is it unanimous? We had a one nay vote.
Yeah, so it has to go to the next meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So on ordinance 2020-15, you're correct, Your Honor. I did give you two options. If you decide to go ahead with the second reading tonight, I would have to read a little bit because I had to change some sections at the end about the effective date. I think I highlighted that language in the report. If you decide just to continue it to November, then that would be fine also. What I was trying to do was to give your new planning director an opportunity to become familiar with this before it gets dropped on their head. And the same with your staff, just so they have time to familiarize themselves, and code publishing is going to have to get into the ordinance and into our code and make sure that all the cross references are caught. Added some language to address that. So probably the easier thing to do, because it involves me reading less, would be to continue this to November 23rd.
It's funny because I was going to think that so we wouldn't have to deal with it again. Just put a future effective date.
I'm fine with. I have to read the changes and do the second reading if you're ready to proceed. Okay, either way.
Council, what do you have a preference? What if you don't mind, Mr. Apicello, to have you read, just because we do have a tendency to push things forward and it might clear a future.
Okay. Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2020-15, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning, Chapter 1776, administrative provisions, replacing existing provisions with a new uniform, there's an extra word there, procedural Chapter 1776 procedures, adding a new Chapter 1777 applications, modifying, consolidating, relocating, or removing procedures and standards for a more efficient review process. And as I mentioned, there are a few changes I'll have to read. They are highlighted in the staff report in the whereas clause. We would strike the words on July 13th, 2020 and August 10th, because that's not, I just referred to the required readings instead of those dates. Section 28 is rather amended to read ordinance delayed effective date, notwithstanding the ordinary effective date provisions of Chapter 9, Section 9.3 of the City Charter. This ordinance shall take effect on January 1, 2021. And under the codification section, there's an added sentence. The city attorney is specifically authorized to work with code publishing to correct all cross-references to the procedures chapters impacted by this amendment, regardless of where they occur in the municipal code, because we have a number of references to these chapters in other provisions of the code, and they're not all set forth here. So with that, I'd ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance with the delayed effective date.
Entertain a motion.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number.
It's a second reading.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Second reading of ordinance 2020-15.
And adoption of the ordinance with the changes as read.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. We have a motion to approve by Councilor Hinton and a second by Councilor Casper. Any discussion? Seeing, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Oh.
Hinton.
Oh, yes.
Casper.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Parsons.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
And Hoagland.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, we have down to special order of business, economic toolbox. Allison Robertson, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is really just to update you. Since I wrote the staff report, I had requested your permission to apply for an EPA CWA grant, which is Environmental Protection Agency Community-Wide Assessment. It's a grant where we can apply for up to $300,000 to help private property owners with making some environmental assessments on their properties to help determine if they have any contamination or get a no further action notice on their property, which would help them then be able to provide that to prospective owners if they are planning to sell their properties, or if they just want some additional information for themselves about how they can redevelop their properties. So this is another possible avenue for us to get some funding to help with economic development efforts with redevelopment in the city. When I wrote the staff report, I was asking permission, and I don't know if I need to still because there's no grant match that is required as part of this grant. We can consider staff time as this grant, and Jody Mesher, our economic development coordinator, is excited to have the opportunity to take this on. She's actually on vacation this week, or she would be here presenting this to you herself. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about the grant opportunity if you have any.
Well, great. Thank you for bringing that forward. It would be a very good tool to have in our toolbox. And as we know, we do have some brownfield type development opportunities in town. So any questions from council? Allison, I guess I would have a question. Do you know if we're fortunate enough to get it or get any, is there typically a time limit of has to be used, or is it, can we, sit and, we'll certainly market for it, but,
Yeah, I think the grant is for 3 years.
oh, okay.
And so there's plenty of time we would have to do bids, get a contractor on board for the work, do outreach with the private property owners to figure out who's interested, and then set up those, hopefully bundle them so that it's more efficient of doing several at one time, getting the results and then communicating that to those owners. And then we would just do quarterly reports. Jody did get in touch with St. Helens, I think is the city that had recently done a similar grant. And they said that it was not too time intensive once you got through the application portion. Then you just did an update every quarter. And there's no monitoring over the long range. That's always my concern about federal grants is, do we have the capacity and what are the requirements for the next decade, so to speak, of how do we have to still be responsible or accountable to those funds? And in this case, there are not any, there's no actual remediation done if there is contamination found, so there's no required reporting later.
That's great. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Once again, any questions anybody have? With that, I would, she's really not asking permission because she doesn't need it. But thank you, Allison. That's a great tool, and it's actually another nice thing to see the economic development department, yourself and Jody, bringing stuff forward that certainly will help with the development. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. And we can't take all the credit. One of our consultants brought this grant to our attention.
It's all right.
So it's appreciated. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Do well. All right. We have then residential parking permit areas as a item.
Yes, sir. So City Council had tasked me with looking at two types of parking restrictions. One is an area, or it was a residential parking passes, and the other is to the creation or the criteria for no parking zones. As I worked on this to bring this before you tonight, one of the things that I found as I visited with multiple groups and individuals about this is that is the need for a lot more public input on the impact this would have in very small areas. Often the question that I had was, what does this mean for in front of my house? And so we were able to talk quite a bit about that, but I was left with the feeling that we need to create more opportunities for public input of small groups. And so that's essentially what I'm asking for tonight, is to take this on the road, as you will, and trust in our very talented IT group to help me figure out how to create small neighborhood meetings. But essentially, this is the framework that was developed, of which Richard would ultimately be tasked in developing an ordinance that would be associated with this. Under a residential parking zone, it would be allowed in some zones, but not all of zones. The ones that we identified as where it would be permitted would be in residential zones, which include the R15 zone, the R175 zone, the R110 zone, the R1E or the Roads End zone, multifamily residential zones, recreational residential zones, and then the Nelscott Cottage residential zones. It would also be permitted in mixed-use zones, which are the Nelscott Beach mixed-use zone, the OP Interior mixed-use zone, the OP Oceanfront Interior zone, and the Taft Village Core. OP is the Ocean Lake area. The minimum size for an area, I've left that blank at this point. to consult both with you and as we go and talk about that. In every ordinance that I've looked at all throughout the country, they establish a minimum size in which the applicant has to, or the application has to be. In other words, it may be a block, it may be a certain amount of square footage, but there is a minimum size that's required for the application process. This would be driven by application. It would not necessarily be that the city is going out and actively creating these. The neighborhoods would have to apply for it. The criteria for applying would be 25% of the average number of non-residential vehicles, that are vehicles not connected with residents or businesses in the area, must exceed the total number of spaces available. An example, 50 total on-street parking spaces available, 13 of the 50 are occupied by non-residential vehicles. And then second is 75% of the parking spaces are occupied, and this varies depending on the city that your ordinances that you're looking at. I specifically looked at the weekends when we have the greatest amount of non-residential vehicles and non-Lincoln City vehicles coming in. So it's 75% of the parking spaces are occupied Thursday through Sunday on a daily basis. Example, 50 total on-street parking spaces, 38 of those 50 spaces are occupied daily Thursday through Sunday. That's not occupied by resident or non-resident, that's just simply occupied, okay? The exception is the residence or residential complex lacks off-street parking. The approval process would begin, as I mentioned, with an application. It would be by petition. 60% of the affected neighbors and the neighborhood association, if it exists, would have to support the request. And the approval authority would be the city manager, which is consistent with our existing ordinances. Then from there, you would have the individual applications to receive a parking pass. And that would be a small processing fee to cover just the administrative cost per vehicle. The length of the permit would be annual. The number of vehicles permitted per residence, and I put 2 at this point. Number of vehicles permitted per guest vehicles per resident that you could apply for would be 1. And then the kind of documentation that you would need, any one of these would work: a photo ID with its current address, vehicle registration with current address, lease or rental agreement, bank statement, credit card statement, utility bill. The restrictions that would have is that the timed and overnight parking requirements that we currently have in place, that you can't park between certain hours during the night, would not apply when one has a residential parking permit. All other parking restrictions apply, including prohibited storage of use for vehicles over 24 hours along the city right-of-way, as an example. So that is the framework for which we would create an ordinance. But as I mentioned, as I began visiting with different neighborhoods and people throughout the city, I found there were so many individual questions that before you went forward with considering an adoption, it would need some additional public input. And I'd like to do that through just a series of small neighborhood gatherings.
Okay. And what that would do is you'd gather additional information to maybe flush out some of these numbers and thoughts. Is that
exactly
right? Okay? And questions, initial questions. Councilor Hoagland.
Before when we talked, sorry, my dog, stop chewing this chewy thing. I remember, sorry. I remember before the police being able to put notes on your vehicle or on your driver's license, and we had talked about it just being calling the police station, stating, hey, I am so and so, this is where I live, and it's like the place on Anchor, which is I think where the actual residents that have come forward in this problem, and just putting a note on their account and saying, hey, they live here, let's not tow them. I mean, I hear there's, fees and all these other things, and I just would love to see an easy way, something simple. It's not going to cost anybody money, so that people can state that they're here. How many other times has this come up? That residents are being towed or cited.
Other, Councilor Mark?
I just want to clarify, I might even have confusion over some terminology, but we're referring to on-street parking. And in my mind, any place that has on-street parking, you're not in your driveway, you're parking on the street. You're probably parking in the city right of way, correct?
Yeah. Most of the time, yes.
So even with a permit, and it might be a paid permit process, even if it's a minimal fee, we're still telling people you can park your car in front of your house in the street, in the right of way, but after 25 hours, you are violating the law.
That would be the case, yes. It's still not meant to be a storage place for vehicles.
That would be, I'm trying to think, I can certainly think of places in urban areas where it's nice to have a parking spot when you come home from work rather than fight everybody. I'm not sure here. Councilor Casper?
Yeah.
Thought?
Yeah, I specifically on Anchor Avenue, there's a beach access, and people who live in a condo, there is no parking. There's no parking space. It's all on the street, and sometimes it would have to be at the beach access. How would that work in these situations?
Normally what you're going to see as a companion to this is a restriction of the parking greater than what we have now. So for example, it may be a limit of 2-hour parking, unless you have a residential parking permit. Most of these, in our case, it would be for tourists, and as you look in other cities, it's a spillover from businesses that are bordering residential areas. There is usually some form of limitation on the amount of time you can park on a street, unless you have residential permit. Now, the limitation that we have in most places right now is just simply the 24-hour rule. So you would have to add a companion to this that says that there is a limited amount of time in which you can park on the street without getting a ticket, unless you have a residential parking pass.
And at this point, you're not considering an ordinance. So if you wish to add some flexibility to, for example, the 24-hour rule through the permit process, we can look at that. We just need to amend both ordinances to address that. So I think Ron's just talking about, he wants to go out and get input from people and see how complicated this might be.
Yeah, this Richard brings up a really good point on this, because when you start adding these restrictions, you have the residential, but you're also going to be affecting the commerce that may be associated in that area as well. So,
okay. Well, I guess what the nice thing about bringing it forward and showing everybody is to see, match up thought processes, even with council before you go out. That's, if there's things that, you had something else in mind, councilors, when this came up. Now would be a good time to kind of help Ron know in advance and be able to test that kind of stuff as well. Yeah, Councilor Hinton.
Yeah, what I hear from about parking in this end of town is from VRDs. So Once again, I would just like to say that I think VRDs need to accommodate their vehicles, that they are the number that they're allowed on off-street parking. And those are the comments I hear, and I agree with them.
Okay. All right. Well, excuse me, Councilor Mark.
The related issue, and well, to Councilor Hinton's point, would it be possible for a VRD to apply and get a parking permit so that if there is well, I don't know how it would work, but so that they could have a permit for people to park on the street?
They shouldn't be allowed that, because part of their licensing is to provide parking off street. So that should be the end of that conversation.
To accommodate the number of guests.
Right, because there's so many.
Yeah, the other thought I had related, I know Councilor Hoagland's mentioned this before, is this business of people putting no parking signs in front of their property. And there are a couple of those in Color City, and I kind of go, I don't know if they can do that, but I actually don't even really know. We don't really know where the city right of way is, and I'm wondering in some of those properties, it could very well be that the no parking sign is on their private property, and they just don't want people parking in front of their fence. I don't know how to, but I don't know. Is that something we might look at here as well?
Both here and in the next one, in the no parking areas. I might also point out that a VRD, by its very nature and how we classify it, is not residential. These are for residential parking passes, not commercial parking passes.
Good point.
I was contacted by a former counselor this weekend, and they did ask about VRD parking and said, what happens is they're not in their spaces, even though it says they have 5 spaces for 5 bedrooms. They're not parking that way. They're parking out in the street. And he wondered 2 things. One was, could we look at making sure that vacation rental dwelling approvals have vacation rentals having the largest parking space, because people don't go vacationing in tiny cars. And number 2, that maybe we could consider issuing for a fee parking permit to allow them to go put their overflow cars in a city lot. So they would pay to park in a city lot legally, as opposed to in the neighborhood, which is what causes a lot of the conflicts. Just passing that along.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Councilor Hoagland?
Yes, hi. Say that I also spoke with that counselor, and that was the argument of, whether or not they can park full-size vehicles in compact. And so PRDs have one compact, or there's an allowance to have different sizes, but there's no way to enforce they're all full sizes or not. And then I thought previously, when we were talking about the Cove, if they park on street elsewhere, then that's just where they park. And so I hear sometimes that there is no enforcement if they're parking on the street, and then now we're trying to enforce it. And so it's kind of confusing in that where are these people supposed to park? And yeah, thanks, Rick, for bringing that up, because that no parking in front of my house thing, how is that legal, and is it legal? So there's a lot to this, and I want to keep the police able to enforce their 24-hour rule, and I want VRD properties to contain their vehicles, and I want residents to feel comfortable and heard. And so we're actually having a lot of things to play with here, and it's I hope that people feel like they can talk to the city manager about what's going on about it. So it's complicated.
Yeah. Okay, and Ron, you want to roll into the no parking areas? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So under our transportation plan, we have classified streets into different categories. They are the municipal arterial, I got to blow this up a little bit. The municipal arterial, the minor arterial, the collector road, the local road, and then each of those are broken out into high-use streets or medium-use streets. As we looked at what is the criteria for creating a no parking zone, we looked to the transportation plan and what is the ideal road supposed to be like, the type of road we would build now, and whether or not that road would allow for parking. So I'm going to go through the different types of streets. So I am on sorry, let me get this right page. I'm on packet page 237. If you look at this, under this design for the figure number 15A, the optimum street design for a high-use minor arterial street, there is no on-street parking that's allowed on that street. The same with figure 15B, which is the optimum street design for a medium-use minor arterial area. And what that means in a practical sense is that if somebody wanted to have on-street parking there, they couldn't. And this does not become an issue in creating no parking zones because they're not permitted. If you look to packet page 236, you'll note that Logan Road, a portion of it, and then West Devils Lake Road are considered to be minor arterial high street uses. Those are areas that would be no parking. Now, the interesting one on that is in West Devils Lake Road, where we have actually created indentions where we could have some parking on that. But normally you would not see parking on those roads. If you look to packet page 238, you'll see that again, these are low-use minor arterial roads, where again, this is item figure number 15C, on-street parking would not be permitted. On that same page, you have figure 15D, which is the optimum street design for a high-use collector street. Blow this up just a little bit. Again, what you'll note on this is that it has two travel lanes, each of 11 feet, and then two on-street parking sizes of 8 feet wide. So if I had an application to create a no parking area in this, I would look at the right-of-way that we actually have and ask, is it a minimum of 30 feet, 22 feet for the travel lanes and 8 feet? If it was a minimum of 30 feet and there were no topographical issues such as a huge drop-off or something like that, that area would have on-street parking and would not be able to receive a no parking zone. If it had 38 feet, then they could have parking on both sides. Okay. So again, if you recall when we discussed this the last time, our intent is to actually create parking, not to find ways to reduce it. So if on the other hand, the right-of-way was only 22 feet, we would end up creating a no parking zone, or 25 feet or something like that, less than the travel width plus the 8 feet. Now I might point out this has nothing to do with what is already on the ground as far as asphalt. We have some very narrow asphalt roads. This is looking at what right-of-way we actually have. If you look at on the next page, item number 15E is the optimum street design for medium use of collector road, and then 15F is for low use collector road. They are essentially the same. We would be looking for 30 feet to create parking on one side and 38 feet to create parking on another side, or on both sides. When you look at figure 15G, you're looking, and this is the optimum street design for high use local streets. You would need 27 feet, okay? 20 for the travel way and 7 feet for the parking on one side. You would need 34 feet if you were looking at parking on both sides. That would be the same thing for figure 15H, the optimum street design for medium use local street. And then finally 15I is a low use local street, in which it's the same. You would need 27 feet if you're going to, less than 27 feet if you're going to be trying to prevent parking on both sides. Other criteria we would be looking at would be the terrain. I've left one part again blank, which is the minimum size for an application. We would be looking at this by application, not necessarily just one individual lot, but we'd be looking at areas. It would be done by petition. 60% of the affected neighbors and neighborhood association, if it exists, would support the request. So essentially what we would do is that we would go in and it would need to be surveyed so that we would know the parking, or so that we would know the right of way throughout it. If the right of way was less than the optimal design, and there were no terrain issues, we would put up a no parking area. If, however, the survey showed that it met the optimal street design and there are no terrain issues, then we would not create a no parking zone. Again, approval authority would be through the city manager. Then that left me with one other question, and that is the VRD question. VRDs are commercial, some are commercial areas in commercial zones, but there are commercial properties. Many of them are commercial properties in residential zones. We often hear complaints that we were hearing from you tonight about people that are parking, that have the required amount of parking, but still park on the streets, okay? It is not illegal to park on the streets right now in front of a VRD zone, okay? And that would have to be changed in our ordinance to do that. One way to change that is to simply make no parking except a loading zone in front of a VRD. Often we will see VRDs, they'll come, they're unloading things, then they will go find parking somewhere else, or they'll leave their car there. If we created a loading zone in front of a VRD, that would give them a chance to unload their items. If they have more cars than they have for off-street parking, then they would have to go find parking somewhere else. And again, I'm asking for the same thing. This one is actually even tougher than the residential parking passes as far as answering questions from people, because there's so many issues, such as knowing exactly where the property boundaries are, the topography issues that may automatically create a no parking area. VRDs come into this that there's an assumption that is out there that says, if I have off-street parking, I therefore cannot park on the street. And if you think about any other commercial business, we don't put those regulations on them. We don't say you have to provide off-street parking and then you can't park in front of your business. And so because it's in a residential area, There's an assumption that that's the case, but it is not unless our ordinance changes. So again, I'm asking if I can have the opportunity to take both of these on the road a bit and use our talented IT staff to help me figure out how to do this and be protected so that we're not violating any of our COVID-19 restrictions, and then bring it back to you with the input that I receive.
Well, that's helpful. I heard you say a couple times that reminding us we're not trying to necessarily eliminate parking. But I don't know. I wonder if it would be worthwhile, even before you went on the road with this, to kind of look at the roads that come up the most often or areas, and to see if you even have right-of-way, to do anything with.
We've done a little bit of that.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
we've done quite a bit of that. And I've got the notes that have come from that. But what I really need to do is to take that and do it with a neighborhood meeting so people can see actually what would be permitted. I think people in some neighborhoods will be very surprised that this actually meets the parking requirement and they could park there.
Yeah.
Others will be surprised that they can't. And so it needs a little bit of time so people have an understanding of what actually happens in front of their homes.
Yeah. I think the other observation I would have is interesting comment around VRDs and parking overflow, I guess, on the street. By putting up no parking in front of those areas, I think it's the residents in the area that are looking to use those spots for parking. So that would kind of defeat their own scramble for a parking lot, I guess, parking space.
I've actually envisioned in the areas where you have a lot of VRDs, a combination of the two, the no parking areas and the residential parking passes, as a way to try to force people into the public parking areas.
Yeah.
Without trying to offend people, Americans are inherently lazy when it comes to parking. They want the best spot right next to the door, so they have to do the least amount of walking. And so it could have the potential of spilling out into the neighborhoods right around where you put in these parking restrictions.
Mr. Hoagland, you have your hand up. Did you want something?
Want something? No, I would like to say something.
Please.
I'm, to hear that it's not illegal to park in front of a VRD is kind of shocking, that we have a off-street parking requirement with no consequences if you disobey that. I find that to be, I don't know. I don't like that. So I would hope that we look to a way to fix that. And then are you also saying that we don't have our streets surveyed and we don't actually know the widths of our streets and that we will need to have a survey done?
Most of them have been, our GIS employee has got them put together, but as we found with 8th Court, when you got to go out there, the pins are gone. You got to be able to establish where the lines are so you can show people what you're talking about. Somebody's got to, if the pins are gone, somebody's got to find a starting point. The survey.
What percentage do you think that we have our streets surveyed?
I'll have to get back with you on that. I don't know that I know the answer.
Where is your optimal street design coming from?
The approved transportation plan by the city.
And then what percentage of our streets are in this optimum street design?
I don't know that.
So is that important to know, balanced against only the areas of which we're trying to reduce off-street parking or on-street parking?
This could apply to anywhere within the city.
Right. Could apply.
Could.
Right. And then, okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Other questions, thoughts? So is this where we send Mr. Chandler off with his notepads and talking points and gather additional information?
Can we also make sure we include social media?
Okay. Sure. Councilor Hinton?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Right now, it's going to be hard with the notepad, and are people really going to talk to him that way? So social media is a great way of doing it. And I'll be very interested to hear in how you gather these groups of people together. I mean, I know a couple of groups in town that you could get together with, and maybe a couple other areas too, but overall, I'm not sure. But if there's an opportunity to kind of corral areas, like I'll say Holmes Road area or something like that, is there some way that we can keep them connected as a group? I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, but it would be so helpful in so many situations, such as when Ken needs it next time we have a hiccup not a hiccup, but an emergency or a semi-emergency or something that we need to let people know. It would be really nice to be able to have that connectedness with our community in a way that's area specific.
My intent in this is, I'll leave the mechanics of how to do it to our talented IT staff. But my intent is to define the areas in small areas so that it's easy to work with, and then do the preliminary work, which a lot of it's already done, to say this is how these things would work in your neighborhood.
All right, very good. All right. Are there any kind of time expectations, Ron, that we should?
For the time being, if you give me a month, I could probably put it all together inside of a month and bring this back either at the end of October or the first meeting in November.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next item then is we have a city council employee evaluation process, and I saw, oh, there she is. Hi, Abby.
Mayor and council, thank you for coming together one more time on our project to revamp your forms for your employees. Some have been redone and some have remained the same. So in your packet tonight, you hopefully were able to review that the judge's form remains mostly the same. We just changed the instructions a tiny bit. The city attorney's form is requested to be used this year, and then if we can set a timeline to go ahead and modify his form as we look through the documents he's been helping us gather for a new process for him for next year. And then we have the modifications made to the city manager's form after combining all of your comments and the time that we've spent together in a few meetings up until now. I realize I did miss putting in the tip sheet that ICMA has. I would definitely like to include that just because it had some good do's and don'ts and reminders for evaluations, and that was something I think a few counselors had also liked to include. So I would throw that into the packet when I give you all the information that you need. But if I would just like to know if it looks like we've got everything there for you as you requested, and if you're ready to make a move forward.
All right. Councilor Casper, you've kind of taken the lead on this. Could you, thoughts? Is this what you've expected, and we could move ahead?
Yeah, I want to applaud Abby for all the work that's gone into it. It was hard to put so many things together and still utilize what we did have from our old form, especially with the city manager. There were some, really pertinent things and some additions, and I think it came together well. I don't know about the other counselors, but I I like it, and I hope it works for Ron as well.
Okay.
I did have one more thing to add. I know Councillor Hinton had a comment. There were several things that came up in all of our compilation information that are actually more pertinent in the evaluation process. So I'm making a list of those things for when we actually go through the exercise. So if there's something that you think maybe is missing, let me know, and it might be on that list.
All right. And so anybody would just send direct to you their thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, or you could ask now if you want, if we're hoping to move forward, but either way.
Okay. Councillor Hinton?
First of all, Abby, good job. That really looks good in taking all the comments. I have one on page 253, and it's the instructions and timeline of the city manager evaluation. And the first sentence is the city council may conduct a performance evaluation. Why would we not really want to do, why wouldn't that be like shall or will, or rather than may?
It can be whichever you would like. If you say shall and it's every year, we will do what we can to get it exactly every year. If it says may, it gives you a little wiggle room. So that's up to the council.
I'd rather have something more solid so the city manager knows to look forward to it, and we know that that's on our list, our to-do list, that we need to, we need to actively do our job here.
Okay.
And the only other question I have is under the instructions on that same page. It's the first bullet, and it says related fiscal year council goals and priorities. I guess that's when we do it the first part of the year though, so it's more calendar year, but so maybe Ron, I know this is all about you, but maybe you can help me think that through.
So one of the things that we've done is that we establish your goals. We go through your goals in usually February. January, February as we're approaching the budget. But those goals are the ones that actually begin for the next year.
Okay.
And we tie in the evaluation to the goals.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Oakland? Nope, you're muted.
All right, thank you. My biggest concern is that the three of these are so different. And not only that, we have a 1 to 5 rating for 2 of them and a 1 to 4 rating for 1 of them. I don't feel like that's equal. And our job is, we are supposed to be rating these people evenly across the board without things. And it's really concerning to me that there's instructions for the city manager of please keep in mind, these are the things to keep in mind. Review the city's work performance, try to refrain from basing judgment on recent events or isolated incidents only. I don't see that for the judge, and I don't see that for the attorney, and I feel like that's kind of, I don't know. I'm not really comfortable with that at all. And it sounds kind of like, well, before you rate me on how you want to rate me, let me refrain you and put you in this little space to then view me on that. And I don't see that with the other 2 individuals, and I'm not very comfortable with that. I apologize for not giving my information sooner, but I didn't see it that way until, just recently. So those are how I feel, and I think the public would also feel very similar to that, of having 2 different rating systems, essentially a 1 to 4 for one, and with a disclosure on how to do it on the other, and then going on to the other side for the city judge and attorney. It's like, well, here it is. I'm still not in favor of 3 separate things. I don't feel like that's consistent and gives a good perspective of this. And outgoing counselors who aren't being reelected aren't asked to complete it for the oncoming assessment. And I think that's very important and puts a big disadvantage to newly elected officials of having to rate somebody that they really might not have had any kind of observation of. I feel like if you're not being elected, one of the last things you should do is rate the 3 employees.
Mr. Oakland, let me help you with a couple of things. One, we've moved the date to a fiscal year date and after the fiscal year ends. So all these would have moved or planned to move in, after June 30th. So even new electeds, just for that purpose that you've alluded to, they would have at least had 6 months or something with a staff person. So we see the issue. It's better than coming in and being 1 month. The other is I'm not sure, and maybe I'm just interpreting what you mean. We're not comparing staff person to staff person to staff person there. So, again, whether it's a 5 or a 3 or no rating at all, it's that individual, and what's it matter? Because you come up with, how do you think about their particular performance against the criteria that you've placed on the form? So,
I don't think businesses in general have varying different rating systems for their employees. In my experience, it's one rating system applied across the board, and here we have 3 different with the only 3 employees. I'm not in favor of that.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Councilor Hoagland, we also are redoing the city attorney's form. And so the first change that's being initiated is in the city manager's form. And I think we'll see difference in perhaps the judge's form as well. This is the first attempt we've made to change the evaluation. So the others might, be in line with the city managers. We're just changing the city managers initially first.
But your comments were appropriate. Well, they were all very appropriate, but observation regarding the staging, is needs to be consistent and what to consider and not. So I appreciate it.
Well,
Abby, did you, want to?
I could add that, we could add this type of instruction set to each version. I know it does say, here's this and this. It really is just a method to bring you the tools you would be looking at in order to do the evaluation. A lot of that language is, just human resource, legalese kind of things to help people who don't usually do this very often to navigate the process. So
I think it would be great if there was a training for counselors on actual employee evaluations for those that have not been involved in that. I mean, if that's really, if we're going to get down to it, then give us a standardized testing or a standardized course on employee evaluation as well. I mean, if we're all from different backgrounds.
And I'm happy to help walk the council through the process, how it generally goes, not to tell you how to, do it yourself, but I am here to help you with that. And I would, when we do get the information to you as we start this, I would love to meet with you, do a work session and say, this is how it would look, and do that together.
Oh, great. That makes good sense. We'll do that. Any other comments? What we need is a motion to accept these so we can get rolling into some overdue evaluations. Councilor Casper?
I move to get on mic here. I move to accept the city employee evaluations for the fiscal year beginning in July of 2021 and execute current year evaluations as soon as practical following the adoption of the form changes.
Second.
And a second from Councilor Hoagland. Yep, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed with a nay? Hearing none? Great. Thank you, Abby.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I look I'll be getting that information together and moving it forward. If you might keep in mind the timeline to get together on the next set of changes that you would like to do.
Okay. And now, will you send these out to us? Is that, or should we print off of this packet?
Oh, I'll gather everything you need because you'll need more than just what's in here.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Chandler, we haven't heard from COVID in so long. Thought maybe the virus had gone away. Oh, there's Mr. Murphy as well.
It is still here, Mayor, and I just have a couple things, but then I'm going to just let Ken finish it off a little bit. The parks and open spaces have now opened. Even though we're in phase one, the governor has loosened those restrictions. We've had pretty positive feedback to that. That also includes the bathrooms that it's open. We had been contemplating the opening of the community center. However, that has been delayed a little bit because Red Cross is using the facility, and that affects the maximum number of people that can go in. We're hoping to be able to open that next week. The library is also beginning to expand its services. We've already reopened for the curbside services, and we're also working on opening by appointment for things like the computers. The county commissioners met today, and I'll let Ken talk about most of it, but there were a couple of things that I thought were significant that I wanted to mention. The county is still approved to go into phase 2 on September 29th after receiving a letter from the governor and the OHA, which is supposed to come on Thursday of this week. One of the most significant things about that is that right now we don't have immediate plans to open the city offices again. When we do, we intend to do it by appointment for really 2 offices, the planning and the public works. Also, the county had made a motion today to lift the 24-hour rule effective immediately. The motion passed 2-1, and the county council, Mr. Belmont, will draft up the order canceling the 24-hour rule. Ken, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Ron. Kind of an overview. Right now, the county, the state and the county are seeing lower case counts over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Having said that, the OHA Director Allen, was on the County Board of Commissioners call today, and they've seen a drop in testing because of the wildfires. 2 reasons. The state lab had to close for 3 days because of air quality, and a great amount of doctors, clinics, and testing facilities have been focused on fire issues, whether it's patients with breathing problems or other types of effects from the smoke or the fires itself for people that may have been injured. So the testing numbers are down. So we probably, they try and test as many people as possible. So those numbers have gone down because of the fires. So they're trying to ramp back up at this time to get more testing. Another thing that cuts into testing, we decided to play Pac-12 football. Tremendous amount of pressure on Oregon and many other states in testing capacity. So those type of things will reduce those numbers. Lincoln County has done, at least in their eyes, Rebecca Austin, the public health director, over the last few weeks, we've had, I think, 3 cases total And so we have met all of the OHA metrics to go to phase 2. And as of their meeting today, they saw no roadblocks or obstacles to stop them from going to phase 2 on the 29th. Chair Katie Jacobson said they will wait to see that letter come from the governor and the OHA director just to validate it, and they'll keep a very close eye on how things go with the case count in the county. And just to be clear, you know, things like the community center having openings in certain areas, the Parks and Rec, that is state adjusted guidance based upon CDC's recommendations of the COVID movement, how it is obtained and that type of thing. So I will tell you, and hopefully some of you, if not all of you, have had a chance to talk to Jeannie Sprague, our Parks and Rec director. You know, I've been there a couple times, and they have done a really, really good job of making sure that their employees and the public are safe, and they're surely getting a test of that with the Red Cross Center being in the community center. So we are still, as Mr. Chandler said, moving forward in those areas. At the point, we will very carefully watch how things are going as we look at other areas that we're going to open up. We are still limiting our public works department, having one person per vehicle, of course, social distancing and hygiene. So it's too early to really tell what Labor Day did to us, if anything. The testing, as I said, has slowed down. So we'll see more of that ramp up as we come out of the Labor Day weekend. So no new current outbreaks in Lincoln County. And so I'll enter questions from anybody on COVID.
Any questions, Councilor Hinton?
I just have a question, I guess, about testing. Are they changing any of the ways that they're testing, or are they still testing groups of people? That's what the last thing I heard is that they were identifying groups of areas, some related to where people worked and others related to other situations. And I'm just wondering if they're changing their way of identifying where and who they test.
Councilor Hinton, to the best of my knowledge, no. The county health departments and the state have clearly learned a lot about workplace outbreaks and what to look for. And so they are still focusing on things like retirement homes, assisted facilities, and different employers, you know, and testing that. And so they have stayed course with their normal testing for those type of situations.
Okay, so no schools or like teachers, I mean, no groups like that?
Not that I'm aware of. The schools have some of their own testing methodologies. I can get you an answer. I don't know if they're on a certain of testing, but I can find out for you.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You don't have to do much work on that, but I was just curious.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm just looking to see if anybody's got them.
Oh.
It looks like you're, Councilor Parson.
Not a question, more of a comment. I'm just glad to see that the governor and CDC finally saw it my way when it came to parks. Open.
Oh, thanks. I'm sure your letters of communication made a big difference.
I did write them.
Okay, good.
I just have one other thing. This isn't related to this, but it is back on the fire, and I was going to ask it during, I have a couple comments during my comment time, so I was just wondering if, Ken, if you're sticking around.
I am.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on COVID? So we'll continue to mask up, social distance, and wash. So that makes a difference. All right, moving on. City manager report. Ron, anything that we missed?
No, sir.
Great. Mr. Epicello, anything you'd like to come in with?
Just that Ron and I discussed his doing an order on emergency housing in terms of RV camping setups, and we'll have something. He'll probably do something by order and bring it back to you at the next meeting for ratification. So just so you know, there have been emails and council's copied on this. So we'll move forward with an order, and you'll ratify on Monday.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Let's move on then. We've got any actions from executive session held this evening.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Casper, yes.
I'd like to recommend that we accept the CIS recommendation for settlement.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Casper, a second from Councilor Parsons to make the accept the recommendation from CIS. Any discussion? I guess not needed. Oh, Mr. Councilor Martin.
Maybe it's just a matter of language. I think I would have said to authorize. I think the recommendation was we authorize CIS to make some offer.
I think that's fine. Judy, Councilor Casper, are you okay with just authorizing CIS?
Yes, Professor Mark.
That's good.
I deserved that.
Yeah. And I assume the second, is it okay? Yep. All right. How about a roll call, Mr. Twig?
Certainly. Councillor Casper.
Yes.
Councillor Parsons.
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Councillor Hinton.
Yes.
Councillor Hoagland.
Yes.
And Councillor Mark.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. This would be a second opportunity for public comment. Anybody in the room, Mr. Twig?
No, Mayor, no public in the room right now.
And Mr. Chandler?
No new comments.
All right. Let's move to councilors. Councilor Casper.
I just want to share something about the fire because I found it so emotionally rewarding. I wanted to let you know about it. I was at a Oregon Cascade West Council of Governments meeting last week, and it's a composition of 3 counties, Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln, and I'm the representative for us there. But we were talking about Community Services Consortium, CSC, and it's dealing with senior citizens and disabled persons, and which I hadn't even thought of, but evacuations that took place were a result of all these workers who work with senior services. When they got a call for the evacuation for level 3, and there were 420 people in 3 counties that had to be evacuated, they made contacts with every home care person taking care of these people. And when they needed to be taken out, they contacted law enforcement. When they couldn't make contact with people in levels 2 and 3, then they called the emergency management and personnel, and they would go in and check on all of these people. And what they found out was that the home care workers stayed with all of these people rather than leaving them and going to their own families. And that just tore my heart up that they would go so far. I owe them a great deal of respect and gratitude in doing this. 7 staff people who work, their homes were burned, and as they were taking things out of their homes, they were making phone calls to these consumer groups. So they were saying too that they learned some lessons from this, the senior services, and I'm sure that will come out in our other discussions, but I just wanted to share that with everybody in case they were wondering how that worked, and that's how it worked.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Councilor Mark.
Yeah, thank you. A few things. I guess number one is I want to make sure that people know that I really understand the frustration and the anger, and I can imagine the terror that people were feeling sitting in their cars on Logan Road, not being able to move for hours and not getting the information they wanted. And I appreciate that. I think several of us have acknowledged there was a glaring error in not getting more information out on the radio. I have a couple things, but one thing that jumped in my mind today is, it used to be, and you see this now and then, you drive through an area and you see a sign that says, for weather information, tune to 1640 on your AM dial or something like that. And can we explore what would it take for the city to have a dedicated channel, radio channel like that, that could be really on all the time? It could be giving weather and traffic. And when something like this comes up, the people would know that that's where you go for that information. And of course, it would be connected to power generators and be out of the tsunami zone, and so safe. So I'd be curious to know if we could. I don't know if that would be a solution. Another thing is, I'll say again. In my personal, I was, I guess, a lucky one. I never lost my cell service. I was getting the information I needed. A couple things about that. I saw a lot of angry comments on Facebook from people who were reposting information from the county and complaining that they weren't getting enough information. In my mind, just my family, I was thinking, there were two things I really wanted to know. Where was the fire? And did I have to evacuate? And if I had to evacuate, I'd want to know, which I didn't have to evacuate. But if I had to evacuate, I'd want to know, where do I need to go? So three things. I was seeing that information. So if you had so if people were posting on Facebook, that means they had cell service and they had internet connections. The information was out there. We need to find a way to make it more clear to people where to go for the information, and whether it's to go to the county website, and also to be connected to, they call it this Everbridge system, which is the Lincoln Alerts. And I heard someone tell me that after the emergency started, some 3,000 people connected, and it's probably more than that now, to the Lincoln Alert system. I hope people know that system is out there. I'm wondering, and I did hear people say that they were signed up for the system but never got the alerts. So I hope there's a way to test that. Now, if you lost cell service, if you didn't have the internet, you didn't have a phone, you're not going to get the Lincoln Alerts. But if you had that connection, you should have been getting that. And if you didn't, I would urge people to find out why. Well, the other big one is, and it's, in retrospect, it's maybe a little easy to I'm just questioning why ODOT shut the highway going north. And I guess it was open for a while. And I certainly wouldn't want to be the one in that moment to be making that decision. And I imagine they had good reasons for shutting it down. But I think that's something that we really need to revisit. A couple other things. Somebody else again complained that the hospital did not have a generator. That's simply not true. The hospital had a generator system. They evacuated because they were in the evacuation zone. And so this business of, there's a lot of false information out there and people continue to spread it. I'm concerned about that. I'm looking at my notes here. I guess, I thought I had something else, but I guess that's it. I do want to say, I walked past the Color City playground today, and there were people playing in the playground, and it was a delight to see that. So I'm very happy about that.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And again, reminder that there'll be Ron and Ken will be working with us when we decide for our own after event review. So it'll be keep your notes and bring them up. Mr. Mark Parsons, do you have something?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I unfortunately had the exact opposite of Mr. Mark's situation. I thought I was signed up and still didn't get any alerts, and I've signed up about 4 times since this started, so I'm 4 of those 3,000 plus. Another thing is, this weekend I've been getting a lot of questions from constituents about the agenda. They wanted to see a wildfire item. I said that I would ask for one at the beginning of the meeting. That was covered, so I didn't. But that brought up questions about the process of the agenda. And I was just wondering if maybe Mr. Chandler can explain how we go about setting the agenda and deciding what's most important at that time.
So first of all, timing, the agenda, the agendas actually start weeks before, but all of the agenda items are set for my review on the Monday prior to the city council meeting. We usually try to post, although sometimes it's a day late, by Wednesday for the council meeting. To put something on the agenda, the agenda is prepared by me and approved by me. For a councilor to put something on the agenda, they just need to call and talk to me, and we can make those arrangements. The mayor can do the same thing. If after the agenda has been printed and we want to amend the agenda to add something, that has to have the approval of the mayor to amend that. And then, of course, at the time of the council meeting, the city council can vote to put something onto the agenda. But the key for any of you councilors is the Monday prior. Speak to me before that. I'd like to think I'm pretty good at reading minds, but I'm not. And I'm always fascinated from a purely political science standpoint on what rises to the level of the top for elected officials. And so if you are thinking that something should be on the agenda, then let me know before the agenda is posted so that we can make sure it gets onto the agenda.
Okay, and a follow-up question, is there a process for a citizen to go about getting an agenda item? I'll be honest, I don't know why they would need to. It was just a question that was asked.
Could I chime in just a second? Is that first, the best way for a city council member to get something on the agenda is now, this time for councilors to talk, to bring things up. You say, hey, I'd like to look into doing an ordinance on this, gas tax or whatever it is. Then you guys talk about it and you give direction to bring something back. It's not a good idea just to call the manager and say, hey, I want to put this on the agenda and force the manager to do something. The best time to bring up an item is now, during this time, and then get your friends basically to vote with you to give direction to bring something forward.
The reason why that is the best way to do that is that then you're directing staff, the whole council is directing staff to act and have something prepared. If it is something that you want to accomplish and you call me and just say, let's put this on the agenda, there won't be much staff work that's going to be done before that, and you end up just simply prolonging the process of getting something done.
Okay. Yeah, this was about nothing specific other than citizens wanted to know the process, and I wanted them to, for lack of a better term here, straight from the horse's mouth.
The other thing that you asked about is how does a citizen get something on the agenda? There's two ways to do that. One is to go through their city councilor and go through the process that Richard just described. The other is to come to the comment section and make a request that it has an agenda item, and then the council at this time of the meeting can make a determination if they want to add that to a future agenda. There's no way for a resident to simply say, I'm going to put something on the agenda without it going through the city council or the public, actually without it going through the council, period. It would come to the city council either through the public comments or they would be contacting you. But really the best way is for them to come to the public comments, for you then to discuss it. And if you feel that you want to add it as a future agenda, you can, as well as giving staff direction on what you want to do with that request.
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. Councilor Hinton.
Yeah, I would just like to let people know out there in the world that we do have an emergency preparedness coordinator. I have heard from several people that we don't have one. And once something gets said, then for some reason, then, too many people know it. So everybody out there, this is Ken Murphy. He's been here now for a while and we're very thankful for him. He's an expert in what we need to do to make changes and moving forward. So with that, I would just like to ask Ken, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, where we were with everything as a city. Well, let's just do the first part of it, the evacuation.
Well, I will tell the rest of the council, I spoke to the Roads End Improvement Association, Councilor Hinton and Councilor Parsons was on, and first of all, I would never say everything went perfect. I've done 42 of these disasters now, and nothing ever goes perfect or as planned, simply because people react different ways, and plans are only a plan. Plans can be adjusted. Considering this particular circumstance, if you want the thumbs, I would go sideways. There's always room for improvement. We don't have per se an evacuation plan for the city, and surely we have not practiced one. I would tell you Lincoln City is in that place as hundreds of other communities across this country and probably the world. Just about everything that I think we will talk about from here for the next 6 months, we've already talked about. And now everybody's interested now that we've had a disaster. And I don't say that derogatorily. Believe me, to me, this is a teaching time, a learning time, and a time to try and fix things. So I would encourage that we really look at all of the issues out there, and I've got pages and pages of things that I think we need to think about. I would also ask the council, as we go through this process, what can we do to facilitate other disasters, not just wildfires, but if we're going to make an investment in time and money, how can we help other issues, that we deal with? A good example is the radio station. If we were to do something about that, what we do, would it facilitate tsunamis, earthquakes? Would it facilitate some other types of disaster? So I think my point is, we need to be very wise in our investment of time and what serves the citizens and the visitors to Lincoln City. So the evacuation, considering how it happened, I think it was surely not 100% efficient, but it was effective. And we were under a lot of different issues. Number one, my assumption is Lincoln Alerts did not work properly, at least in the Otis, Rose Lodge, and probably the north end of town. We'd have to do some validation. I've asked the county for some early on records on Lincoln alerts because they keep track of everybody. When you get a Lincoln alert, you have to click and say you responded. And I suspect there was some problems with cell towers. There could have been connectivity between cell towers in Lincoln City and the cell towers that are on Echo or Kimberly Mountain area. I also suspect that I don't know who we is, let's just say the greater Lincoln put a tremendous strain on the telephone, internet, cell service that can cause weakness. Lots of pictures, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, that puts pressure on the system, so that can cause problems. I can tell you, the north end of town, I had the luxury of sitting on the hill for about 3 hours trying to evacuate my family. And I saw Newport Police, County Sheriff, Lincoln City Police, at least in a couple areas, going up and down, knocking on doors, loudspeakers in their police cars, telling people at that point in time what to do. Later on, it was determined that ODOT, I have no idea, had blocked Highway 101 North, somewhere near the Cloverleaf. Don't know if that was a good thing, a bad thing, but it clearly caused some issues, obviously. And I know the county sheriff and the Lincoln City Police Department went down there and gave the ODOT crew an opportunity to be successful or not be successful, and they moved them. And I personally noticed the hill opened up very quickly once that happened. Now, in an evacuation, if you tell people which way to go, you're lucky if 60% follow the rules. The other 40 are going to go any way they think is safe. I do know that we obviously the majority of people went south to Newport. Newport had, believe it or not, traffic light problems at the intersection there on Highway 20. And there was down trees and power lines along the way that was causing problems. So there was lots of these little issues, that when you add them all up, present challenges. So there's lots of different things that we can do, to deal with that. And I've heard, many different conversations about extra roads, different ways out of the county to the city, different communication methods, all fixable, as long as we're patient, we have money, and we prioritize what's most needed, really, to deal with all disasters. I would also ask you as counselors and citizens of the area, think about this, the natural human tendency after a disaster is to rush to fix it, and it won't happen for another 10 or 20 years. When's the last time we had a wildfire in Lincoln City? Anybody remember? I don't. Although the largest wildfires in Oregon's history have been on the coast. I see this as a teaching point, a learning point, and a way to fix things. I'm very proud of Lincoln City and how it stepped up. Otis, Rose Lodge, Bear Creek, Clear Creek, Schooner Creek, Highland Drive, Northeast 50th, all of those. I'm sure most of the council has seen, heard. I've had a lot of people think that Otis and Rose Lodge are in the city, and that's okay as long as people understand jurisdictional boundaries, what the county is doing. And I would tell you, if you get calls from constituents, with things they want to do, take the ideas, but remind them there's a lot of people in Lincoln City that are still helping the residents of the 293 homes that were destroyed, the 22 that had damage, and probably a whole bunch of other issues that we're not fully aware of. And so there's still efforts. I sent out a couple notes today. The Resource Donation Center over in the mall, well, they actually have too much stuff, which is a good thing. And they're sorting through it, trying to get it in the store. Tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they're going to have what the county is calling a multi-agency resource center, where the county and the state are trying to get as many different organizations to come to the mall. It's Suite 200, and provide resources, or at least answers to where to find resources to the victims of the fire. So that's going on for the next 3 days. Just to let you know, tomorrow from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., and we'll get these out in notes to you. I sent Wednesday 1 to 8, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Thursday 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And FEMA will also be there. Yeah, and people, I can tell you right now, people are going to complain about FEMA. I can tell you 6.5 years of complaints when I worked for FEMA. You will never please everybody. And there's certain people that just believe the government can hand them a check the minute they walk up to the table. And unfortunately, that is not true. But I would encourage you, if you talk to people, patience is key to this process. Now, this is going to go on for a while. We also, the county, and we put it on our webpage, the city, people inside the city limits, excuse me, if you had damage from the fire or the windstorm, you can apply for assistance. And the first thing we always tell people, and it's on the website, register with FEMA. And then it has to be validated. And as a reminder, if you have insurance, FEMA cannot duplicate that insurance, but there are other things that can be helped. And the county and Red Cross are allowing people back into the burned areas to work on their homes. The Red Cross is providing cleaning kits, very nice. I know I lost a home in the 96 floods in Salem. The Red Cross provides some great stuff to help people clean. And the county is also doing a great job patrolling the area so far. No known looting. And biggest issue the county is dealing with at this point in time is the safety of people going back into the burned area. Who knows what was in those homes that could be hazardous. You have potential septic systems that are leaching and leaching, water systems that may not be functioning, wells that may be destroyed and not functioning, and just the simple safety of people. So they're being provided masks, gloves, and a packet of information about what to look for, issues concerning asbestos, those type of things. So I hope the city of Lincoln City continues to support the efforts of the people. As of yesterday, the Red Cross had 413 people housed in hotels and motels around the area, to include Salishan. And so lots going on. Biggest push will be to get them some sort of temporary housing. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, generally in these kind of situations, temporary housing can last up to 2 years. Numerous reasons, contractor reasons, legal reasons, environmental reasons, a crappy winter full of rain that won't allow you to do certain things. So I'm going to stop there, and I think, we did pretty good. We did it on the fly. I'd be the first one to tell you that, we were reacting county direction. And I think, we did the best job we could based on people's availability, employees that were losing their homes and everything they owned at the same time, and trying to help everybody because it was a confusing time. And we were very lucky, especially in the north end of Lincoln City. If you drive down Highway 101 and look just past the Niatsu post office that was supposedly burning 8 or 10 times right along with McDonald's Safeway, the fire came right up to the highway 101, and all it would have taken is a nice little push of wind, and it would have been in the golf course, and the north end of town may have had a really, really bad day. So I will stop there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to ask you a question before you get away, though, about that temporary housing. There's been a question that's come to me from a county commissioner about where to put the FEMA trailers, and I thought maybe you might know a little more about that. But so a short list, the idea was the villages. Well, we aren't quite set up for that, but I'm wondering if maybe, there might be some opportunity here with economic development that might make some area available. Then there's also right by that, the school bus area. That's not really flat, but it's at least cleared, sort of. And then there's the future Taft Park. That's at least flat. And then there's the Tribes trailer park on Logan Road. But there's probably other ideas, but I don't know how many, but they're looking to move the trailers away from the fairground because it would be closer to their homes if they were in Lincoln City or the north end of the county. And so I just thought I would bring that up and ask the question of how many trailers we're talking about, and we should be proactively thinking about where they go rather than someone putting them where maybe they shouldn't go.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Hinton. I put a couple FEMA mobile home parks.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult job. I do not know the numbers right now. That's what the county is working through because you have to take the 293 homes that were lost and the 22 homes that were damaged and separate out those that have insurance. FEMA can't duplicate that insurance.
Okay.
You're going to come up with a number. Now, out of that number, and just for math, let's just say 150 people need a place to stay and another 150 had insurance. I'm guessing. So out of that 150 that need a home, you interview each one of those families to find out, are you going to go stay with Uncle Bob in Hillsborough? Or are you going to go stay with Mary in Newport? Or do you need a place? And so eventually you're going to come down to a number that may be. And at that point you have a rough idea, and this is going to happen, to really get the process moving. So, to get mobile homes in here, getting the mobile home here is easy. It's building a mobile home lot that is very, very difficult. I mean, I'm telling you what everybody on the council knows. You've got land issues, whether it's public or private land. You're basically building a city. In my opinion, I've done this twice. Both of them have lasted at a minimum of 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so you need water, sewer, garbage, police services, electricity, internet. Mm-hmm. Think about all the things it takes to set up a city. And these are generally 2, 3, or 4 bedroom mobile home. And you need streets, you need some lighting, so complicated as far as land goes. And would it be nice to have a piece of flat land? Yes. I think, one of my biggest questions to the county is, have you looked and thinking of, but I don't think they can come up with a solid number yet because they're still trying to interview people that have lost their homes. And frankly, at this point in this disaster, those people are more interested in going up to their burnout home site, sifting through things, looking for memories and things that are important to them. But I hope the county is on this quickly because winter is approaching.
Yeah, I was just hoping maybe, does FEMA pay for all the setup? So would that be a way to get electricity? I'm just trying to see, is there an angle here for the city if we can help provide this for a couple of years? And could there be an added benefit, let's say, to trying to help work this out?
You know, I'm going to give you the middle of the road answer. It's a maybe until we find out numbers and what kind of land requirements there are. This could be a mobile home park for 20 trailers, or it could be a mobile home park for 150 trailers.
Or they could be in more than one area. I mean, you wouldn't have to put everybody all in one spot. But.
And as a good former FEMA employee, they don't want to put it in the floodplain.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you. I just have one more comment, which is Ron's tie. I just thought it was pretty funny. Needed something to laugh about, or
so I wore this pink shirt and my polka dot tie today to tell our staff to have a lot of joy, happiness today, and find a little bit of silliness.
Thank you. I really needed it.
Okay, Councilor Hoagland.
Thank you for all the information. I think it's great for people to hear you and hear all your experience, and you know, it's nice to have that as someone who's been experienced in that, and for some of these people, they've never done that. So I think having you here and your voice is very great. So I appreciate the time that you hung on and able to discuss, you know, from your point of view, what the future is and how that looks, and then people can hear that directly. I appreciate that. You know, to second a lot of what everybody else has said, you know, I feel like there could have been more that we could have done, and you know, especially at the radio, not having that emergency radio going or a way in which people could get to that radio. I think that's probably the one thing that, aside from social media, without having cellular service, you know, if there was at the police station or something, a radio that was transmitting where to go and, you know, things like that, or is there a way to reuse the tsunami sirens that if it's not just tsunami, but also this is an emergency event. And if you hear that, tune in to that, and the way in which every resident could have, you know, an emergency radio, or really say, hey, you need an emergency radio, and here's the reasons why. And then that Hey Lincoln City hashtag for social media, I think with this was a huge opportunity for the city to step in and put more things out. And don't get me wrong, the police station, the library, and a lot of all those counselors were doing and working and trying to get the information out as much as possible. But, you know, the Lincoln City's social media presence was disappointed a lot of people. And I would like to make sure that, you know, that's not something that we're going to do again. And, you know, and that's all we can do is say, yeah, we hear you're disappointed. We hear that, you know, we could have done better, and we're still going to do that. We are going to do better, and here are the things. And all of us here have put all the time, you know, the time and care and energy that we could. I mean, you know, so I don't know. It's so tragic, and it's so, you know, but, you know, good job everybody here. I know you guys all did work, and the council and staff and everybody. It's just, it's heartwarming and tragic at the same time, but appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I might remind or inform, Ken and Ron and I are actually on Wednesday doing something similar with the chamber. Again, just a little preview before the after event review comes out. So there's some of that reaching out. But with that, Mr. Parsons, you still have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing. There's a lot of people out there that need help and aren't asking for it because they feel that there's people that are in a worse situation than them. This community has shown an amazing outpouring of support for everybody, not just the 293 homes that were lost, for everybody. If you are in need of any help, go to these donation places and they will help you.
Great. Thank you. All right, with that, let's call it an evening and travel safe and keep your mask on.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.